So that's one just little journey through clearly a planning framework that we've developed, and then some emerging work that we're doing at a local community level. What it's saying to us is that we have been able to, quite simply using an I button as a way of demonstrating to people the link between their house and sort of increasing temperature, how really quite straightforward it's been to bring people on board, not on a climate change conversion kind of project, but have some outcomes. If we get 35 households that are better prepared for heat wave, then we're certainly very pleased with that. Service access is something we wanted to sort out, and as I mentioned, the community have been. Joe hasn't just really quite got the discussion going, and that tells me that actually their level of readiness to talk about service access doesn't seem to be there. You can ask them what they want, but there's kind of no idea. Now, whether their expectations, they're quite happy to travel that half an hour. That's the sort of thing we'll be mapping out. So this is my lovely eagle this is a local artist. He's a farmer. He's a very strong leader in our community, and he's a bird ornithologist and an artist. And I'm going to use this eagle a lot to show that actually we have to be really good at looking at that policy level in our work. But if we don't zero down into some of the really local community impacts of it and understand the local social connection and the local social impacts, then our policy work will suffer. So that the capability of an eagle, to look right across the big broad, but to also be focused on some of that detail, because some of the detail is actually the human, the humanity of it all. So thank you very much, and happy to answer any queries from you intelligent researchers. Stuck to my spot.
There's a question from Stephen online. He actually has two questions. And he complimented fascinating presentation. Okay, so to start, hold on. Okay. Have you worked with, or do you envision working with, architects or landscape architects to redesign the built environment to address the climate change impacts you describe? That is, redesigning to reduce threats from new disease vectors, extreme weather, etc.
There would be, increasingly that's what our architects are doing. So at a level, if you are clearly at the wealthy end, you will be redesigning. That's exactly what people are doing, redesigning homes or building new homes that are climate friendly. There is some good work being done for any new public housing. They're also taking into account. The community that I'm working in clearly is at a position where they've got a weatherboard house that they need to retrofit. So we're much more at using the house that we've already got, and how do we retrofit that? And we've used that environmental engineer to give us the science around that. If we were in a position to be talking about new houses, which is really not what this local community is about, then that would be a very good next step. Particularly developers. Developers now of new housing developments, they're not hugely good at this, but they're getting a little bit better at the way they're designing their new developments.
There's part two. Also, is anyone working with the farmers to support them in moving to new crops, agricultural practices, and is anyone then looking at how those new agricultural practices will affect the landscape and community?
Yes, lots of work, huge amounts of research into drought-tolerant crops, and we have a lot of support for our local farmers who are shifting into cropping. So there are grains officers, all sorts of people that are assisting those farmers to shift their enterprise, become more environmentally aware, and much of it is about cost reduction. You know, it's actually the cost reduction by using less chemicals. It's changing our systems of agriculture, but it's also saving money. So much more direct drilling of pastures, etc. So yes, there's support for farmers. We have looked at, we're starting to talk about, well, if there's a shift in cropping, how does that then shift the changes in our community? They're probably not, from our point of view, it's not a marked change in the whole community. It's a marked change for that farmer, but it's not a, we're not talking about suddenly we're into a completely different agriculture system that will change the social fabric or the impact on our health. But they're fascinating questions, because in other parts of Australia, there would be certainly that would be something to watch for, a change in agricultural industry and how that impacts on the community.
Hi, I'm the Director of Sustainability at Dalhousie with the Office of Sustainability, and we're working on a climate change plan. And our plan will include mitigation, adaptation, and vulnerability study. We're working on the vulnerability assessment now and the adaptation part. And I wondered, I just had a meeting with Environment Canada this morning on this topic, and we were trying to figure out what kind of scope we'd apply to the vulnerability assessment part as it relates to services. So when we look at transportation, how far out am I going to cast the net in terms of analysis, or am I going to look at food, the percentage of food from outside the region that comes by ship or truck, or are we going to sort of narrow it down in terms of just go down to the superstore and we'll draw a line and that will be our kind of food area. So I'm wondering if you had any comments on the services and the scope of analysis that you might apply to a localized vulnerability assessment.
You know what I'm going to ask you back, don't you? It's really about what's your goal, so getting that right. What's your purpose? What do you want to get out of it? And I guess that impacts on whether you are researching it to understand that very broad question, or what level of intervention you're going to be working at. So it really comes down to your goal. If you clearly, if you go broader, you're going to be getting some bigger answers about what is impacting locally, but you've also then got some perhaps harder things to influence. Does that answer your question? What do you think your goal is?
Well, I started off a different goal this morning than I did today, because I've actually had 2 or 3 climate change meetings. So
oh, good. Yeah. Okay.
And to give you a sense, I was thinking on campus. But after listening to you and somebody else today, I'm thinking, well, what about Dal's responsibility to the community in the case of an emergency? So when you talked about social networking and you had that graph up there, I'm thinking, oh, okay, how well are we connected on the emergency preparedness and its ability around climate change scenarios, and what is our responsibility? So I guess I was having a more narrow focus originally, because I know how big this can get.
Yes.
But I'm just thinking maybe it would be not effective, though, to not take on some of these a tiny bit broader perspectives. And I just worry that we're going to miss a big one that's outside our initial scope of analysis. So if you did have any kind of documentation on where other people have taken
for food, and what
food too,
what are you actually measuring?
Well, to date, I mean this. Right? We're in the middle of it, right? So we're going to look at essential services, buildings, new and existing, classes, people attending classes, and natural environment, energy. I guess energy would come under services, and now I think we're going to add community.
And you're